the sanction and like actions which are taken. So how would you assess and what we can expect in the nearest future, what you think? Because it's always telling that very soon there would be something happening. I mean, but it lasting already for a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
Like the miracle would come, she would finally, it takes time. And, how much time they need.
Well, look, from my point of view, Western policy has been very, very slow during the Maidan and afterwards. I agree with you, but nevertheless, there's a big difference between now and during the Maidan. There is a recognition that there's a problem, which is something entirely new. And there are some sanctions, admittedly largely symbolic, but if you look at the consequences for the Russian economy, the consequences for the Russian economy are already real. This is something which is maybe felt, beyond Ukraine more than it's felt in Ukraine. And I think that Western leaders have recently done exactly the right thing in linking future sanctions to the elections. The elections happening on May 25th is absolutely crucial because it restores normality, it restores a measure of legitimacy, it removes an argument that this is some kind of revolutionary situation. And also it's a chance for the Ukrainian state just to do something. And it's obviously what the Russians have been trying to prevent. And I think it's true. I think if the Russians do try something dramatic to stop the elections, I think there will be dreadful sanctions. And there's some sign that
dreadful.
Putin,
what is it, dreadful?
Dreadful. No, I think okay, let me be specific. I think if the Russians try to disrupt the elections in a visible way, there will then be sanctions that have to do with sectors of the economy, the finance sector and the hydrocarbon sector. And I think it's also very likely that the Americans will do something which they were considering doing before, which is trying to manipulate world oil and natural gas markets. I think that will come.
But have you mentioned this idea that, there is a part of to create an image or to create the feeling of the civil war in Ukraine, then when it comes and then the side's telling it's inside issue, it's getting different, it's not just the one country we protect, but there is something happening inside of Ukraine, let them sort it out on their own.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
No, meaning that if there is a civil war, it's up to the Ukraine to sort its own issues. It's not for us to interfere because it's two-sided. It's all inside. It's not just that much about the Russia, but an inside conflict in Ukraine.
I mean, interestingly, nobody really thinks that. I mean, as slow and as naive and as complicated as we are, no one in the West actually believes that, or no one except people who are paid to think that, or people who are. But really, no Western leader thinks that that's true. I mean, people understand that there's a divided polity. They understand there are different political opinions, but no one thinks this is a traditional civil war. Everyone believes that the Russians are involved. So in that sense, things are not as bad as they might seem. I don't think anyone is going to buy that. Certainly, if things get bad enough, people can give up hope in trying to help. But you can see in the universal support for the elections of May 25th that people don't think that this is already some kind of civil war situation. People think that this is a situation in which the central state can still demonstrate that it controls most of the country. So, no, I don't think it's as bad as that.
And what do you think? People said that for Putin, it's important to kind of save the face. There should be some exit strategy for him, because in a way, any kind of conflict ends up with a compromise.
Yeah, but look, Putin is a much. So, I mean, the way Russian politics works is different from the way that politics in Germany or America works. At the level of propaganda and tactics, Putin is way better than anyone he's dealing with. His problem is that at the level of things he cannot control, like society or unpredictable events, he's much worse because Russian institutions are so weak. There's no way to handle unpredictable things. There's no way to handle mass movements. So, when it comes to saving face, he can save his own face. That's his issue. That's his problem. He understands Russian politics much better than we do. The idea that we can figure out how Putin can save face is totally ridiculous, right? It's a system we don't understand. It's symbolism we don't understand. And things in Russia move very, very fast, right? So that's not our problem, Putin saving face. That's an internal Russian problem, right? So what we need to be concerned with doing is making sure that the things that we think are important are protected insofar as that's possible. How Putin feels about it all and how Putin protects himself inside Russia, that's for Putin to deal with.
There is one also issue. Now we understand that about the issue with the police and security, that it's incredibly corrupt. I mean, especially in this, and that's a part of the reason they are there is a defection, all these cases. But there is a dilemma. You can leave these people. You can kind of, we talk a lot about the illustration. You can fire those people, but in the end, you can end up with the guys with a lot of unemployed guys. That's actually what the police is afraid of, that the new government would kind of cleanse them. So are there any examples of how to get out of that with the smallest loss?
In the history of the police, absolutely. There are examples. I mean, first of all, to be very cynical, there are examples of police forces who do terrible things, and then when situations change, they stop doing terrible things, right? The German police or the Austrian police, right? The nice guys who help you across the street where we're sitting, 70 years ago, they were shooting people in large numbers over pits for no reason during a war. When the war stopped, they stopped doing that, right? So to be very cynical, if you can change the overall social condition, the police behavior will also change. But to be less cynical, yes, one thing you can do is you can rotate cadres. You can make sure that people don't serve with the same people as they've been serving with before. You can move people around the country. And third, there are programs where lawyers and others are assigned to work with policemen to retrain them about the rule of law. There are things like that. There are Western programs which have worked in that way, and they inside the West itself, right? I mean, your average policeman in Texas or Arkansas is not necessarily a civil rights crusader, but you can work with these people. The very important thing with the police is that you can't see them as the other, right? You have to assume that they are half of the they can be the problem, but you can't solve the problem without them. You have to have a police force. The law doesn't matter without the police, and you have to respect that they have a difficult job. Once you respect that, then generally you can start to work with them. It's not impossible.
And finally, would you tell, so you organized in this conference in Kiev, what it would be, what we can expect from it, what is the aim of it?
Yeah, it's not really a conference. It's much more.
Let's finish that.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It has its own soundtrack. It's much more a gathering. It's much more a kind of gesture of solidarity. What it is the more or less spontaneous desire of international intellectuals from the West, but also from Russia, to come to Kiev, first of all, to show solidarity for the position of Ukrainian society, but second of all, to learn from Ukrainians. That is, to recognize that the Maidan and the experiences after the Maidan are serious, not just in the sense of emotionally or politically, but also intellectually. The Ukrainians have gone through something from which the rest of us can learn. And so the idea is to have a very high-level public discussion where intellectuals from outside and Ukrainian intellectuals can talk about the big issues of human rights, geopolitics, culture, totalitarianism, corruption, in a way which might be inspiring and hopefully will be interesting for Ukrainians themselves, and ultimately will be the beginning, I hope, of much longer conversations and friendships that will continue.